Joining. Okay. So welcome. This is the 8th training online webinar that we are organizing in the framework of the joint actions on increasing the capacity building of national focal points. And it is part of the training program within the Work Package 6 that kicked off already 1 year ago, and also we have already concluded the first module on site of the training. Just to remind also that the webinar will be registered in the meantime. Okay, I'm checking. I think we are live. And my name is Sandita Florea. I'm working for ProMIS, affiliated entity of the Italian Ministry of Health in this joint action, just for colleagues that maybe might not know us. I will quickly present the agenda. So today we are going to deepen the European structural and investment funds with a focus on health, of course. We remind also that within the Work Package 5, we are working towards creating and stimulating synergies with other health-related programs, and the work package is led by colleagues from Austria and led by colleagues from Hungary, and we are already ahead with the activities. So I will just check that we are, no, I don't see we are live. Yes, we are live. Okay. So before starting again, just to remind you that you can write in the chat if you have any question. Anyway, we will have a dedicated session. Then today's speakers will be Angela Brescia from ProMIS, project manager, working with us. And at first, there will be an introduction to the cohesion policies and a deep analysis of the new programming period, 2021-2027, of the European structural and investment funds. Then there will be a dedicated session, of course, on health and social opportunities. And Angela will explain us more how to focus on this topic, in order then towards the conclusion perhaps to find out which synergies among shared and direct management funds might be explored, and we hoped, of course, to stimulate a discussion by the end. I will also just remind that, of course, at the end of the webinar, we will be sharing also a survey in order to assess and evaluate the activity, and this is very important as part of our evaluation project's activity. So, Angela, I think I can give the floor to you. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, everybody. And also, I would like to thank you for this invitation and all the other colleagues for attending this meeting. As Sandy was saying before, I'm working like project manager with EU funds, mainly cohesion policy funds from all over 15 years old from right now. And I had the opportunity along these years to see how synergies could be fruitful and important among different funds, among different programs, and also among different countries. So I'm going to share my screen, just a second. Okay, so as Sandy said before, she presented the agenda, so I want to start with an introduction to cohesion policy. But before starting to the introduction of cohesion policy, I want to share with you an idea. According to Eurobarometer, it says that citizens, European citizens, we don't know mainly which is the added value of cohesion policies or EU funds in general. For example, I'm bringing you an example of Italy. people we don't know, or usually citizens, that stakeholders, they don't know that, for example, Pompeii recovery or Caserta, Reggia di Caserta has been rebuilt with EU funds and funds from cohesion policy. So it's important to understand the cohesion policy, and I'm sure that all of us, at least one time in our life, we heard about cohesion policy. We heard about this, okay, because we are targeted stakeholders, but in general, we can say that cohesion policy is important because it's the main investment policy of the European Union. And it is addressed to EU regions and cities and support the economic growth, sustainable development, and improvement of citizens' quality of life. So we can say that it works to a very wider framework, and it can tackle several aspects and several sectors, as we are going to see in the next slides. So the first thing is that, okay, it is a policy, but we know that there is a huge amount of money that is managed, that is under this cohesion policy. But in order to have this, we need also a legal framework. And this legal framework is given by the Article 174 of the Treaty on Functioning of European Union. Let me to read together some few lines about this. In order to promote the harmonious development of the Union as a whole, the Union develops and continues its action aimed at strengthening its economic, social, and territorial cohesion. In particular, the Union aims to reduce the gap between the levels of development of the different regions and backwardness of the less favored regions. Among the regions concerned, particular attention is paid to rural areas, areas affected by industrial transition, and regions with severe and permanent natural or demographic handicaps, such as the northernmost region with very low population density and islands, cross-border and mountain regions. Why I took some minutes in order to read all these articles, because here there are the main aims, so the keywords. So that is harmonious development, reduce the gap, and as we are going to see later on, we introduced a sort of geographic dimension, and it has been given with the Lisbon Treaty. So it is important because it is not something stated at European level, but I'm sure that also at national level, in your constitution, for example, in Italy, it is defined at Article 19 of our constitution. We took more or less exactly the same article, because this policy is something that has to be developed at the same time at EU level, and also at national level. In these slides, I represented a story. So 66 years of the story, the evolution of cohesion policy. Cohesion policy started in 1957 with the Treaty of Rome, and we are going to see how it works up to date, up to nowadays. What is important to say that this path is important to understand the story, and why we are going to focus on some details, this milestone, because this milestone allows us in order to have a clear picture of the context of the framework, and also according to the passing of the years, it's important that our project will be shaped according to the real needs. So as we said, we started from 1957 with the Treaty of Rome. We are not speaking about the European Union. We were talking about the European Economic Community. And the aim of the funding states was to strengthen the unity of their economies and ensure the harmonious development by reducing the disparities between the different regions. So, as you said, according to the actual treaty of the functioning of the European Union, we said that there are some common words. So, strengthening the unit, but here we are working in specific addressing only to economies. So, we are not including about social aspect, for example. But social aspect is very important. In fact, in 1958, the European Social Fund has been created. It has been the first fund that has been created among these policies under the umbrella of this policy, but in 1958, there's no real regulatory source, so it was just a financial instrument for the cohesion. While moving after the years, we arrived after 10 years in 1968 for the creation of a new Directorate General with specific competencies on Regional Policy Committee, because they understood that the region are the heart of the European Union. Okay, moving on, we say that there's no specific financial system, and it arrives with the Delors first package when it was a set of proposal of this reform for financial statement. And something it's important to underline that the reform leads to a substantial increase in resources that was more or less double than they initially foreseen by 1958, sorry. But as we said, we need to arrive up to 1993 to the Maastricht Treaty to start speaking about European Union. And with the Maastricht Treaty, we have that cohesion policy is one of the European Union main priority. Priority, it means, again, financial aspect. So in 1993, we have Delors package number 2. And here we have the establishment of cohesion funds that did not operate under the normal rules of structural funds, but we start moving and changing something. Then we arrive in 1999 with the Agenda 2000. So we start speaking about simplification, and simplification is one of the keywords also of this actual programming period. So for the first time in Agenda 2000, we have a clear division of the roles of European Commission, member states, regions. We start speaking about strategic objectives, priority axis, more or less something that we are used to hear about also in this period. And with Agenda 2000, we know that the 7-year duration of the programs has been established. Then I mentioned before Lisbon Strategy. So all of us, we know this Lisbon Strategy because it created the context of a knowledge-based economy. And we start working on 3 new objectives: convergence, competitiveness, and cooperation. Together with in 2007, we have also the Lisbon Treaty, and the Lisbon Treaty introduced the concept of territorial cohesion. If you remember the article that we read, we start speaking also about territorial cohesion with some geographic aspects and geographic referring to the regions and disadvantages region. When we have done the Europe to 2020 strategy, and we start speaking about new keywords that are smart, sustainable, but also inclusive growth. And this is important because through the increased concentration on some objectives, because it's important that funds has to be concentrated, we start focusing our attention on innovation, employment, social inclusion, but also environment and climate change. Up to now, we are used about hearing Green Deal or environmental sustainability and so on. So we are just closing in these days the programming period 2014-2020, and for the first time we have a common strategic framework. We start speaking about partnership agreements between Commission and Member States, and we are working in this programming period with the so-called ex-ante conditionalities. All of us, we know these ex-ante conditionalities because they are a sort of ex-ante analysis that has been performed by the European Commission in order to allow having funds of cohesion policy. Now, from 2018, we start speaking about programming period 2021-2027. And the keyword here is simplification, because the main aim of the reform is to simplify procedures, and to increase the effectiveness of EU investment. So these are the keywords that has to be followed in all our intervention, in all our project. Here we defined just 5 policy objectives, that is smarter Europe, greener Europe, more connected Europe, more social Europe, and a closer Europe for citizens. But we are going to see them deeply later on. So just to summarize, we can say that with the 2004 treaty, economic, social, and territorial cohesion was formally assumed among the objectives of the European Union. In fact, just by reading the Single European Act of 1986 and the Lisbon Treaty, we can see the difference on which we are speaking about. In fact, from one side, we are speaking about economic and social cohesion, and from the other side, we are speaking about economic, social, and territorial cohesion. I said before that, for example, funds that became double funds, or some activities that has been the focus or the intervention of these policies and these programs and these instruments. So funds has not to be spread, but concentrated on some specific topics. We spoke about also programming period. So more or less, we anticipated some of the key principles of the cohesion policy and the structural funds. Now we are going to analyze and to see also, it could be a sort of starting point to evaluate if you are going to apply these principles also in other programs, in other also direct programs. So we spoke about additionality. The principle of additionality says that the European aid, so the European funds, cannot replace the economic intervention of the member states, but this has to be a sort of an additional value. So, and we have to create synergies with it. So this is important. So funds, European funds, cannot substitute the national ones, but has to work together. Then we can say focus. Cohesion policy intervention focuses in the planning phase on the most relevant needs and in programming phase on the most effective measures. Let me concentrate on these two words, planning and programming. So it is typical when we are speaking about programs or operations, like are they known in this programming period, because we have to plan. And in planning phase, we have to focus on the relevant needs. So this is the reason why in all our program, there is a sort of background analysis. And then in programming phase, we have to implement the most effective measures, because here we have the intermediate bodies, intermediate organization that has to take the information, the input of the planning phase, and they have to start defining more operative lines and guidelines. And then we have final beneficiaries that, basing on all this information, has to develop their project or operations. Then programming. Cohesion policy intervention are defined on a basis of multi-year programming activity negotiated between the region, the member states, and the European Commission. So here it's stated that all our activities has to be aligned with a policy, multi-annual policy, usually 7 years. And so it is a long-term intervention. Complementarity, this is important. The principle established the possibility for the European Union to intervene in areas that are not within its exclusive competencies if the objectives pursued cannot be achieved by the member states or can be better achieved at European level. I know that last week you attended on 16, you attended another meeting regarding the European territorial cooperation. That was very much more clear. So there are some activities that are related mainly with national and regional policies and activities. But there are some cases in which, in order to tackle a problem, in order to identify a solution, we need a wider perspective that could be at several regions or also at European level. So in this case, complementarity has to work not with only funds, but also with the policy, capacity of policy intervention, a capacity of intervention in order to solve and to tackle a specific problem. And then we have partnership. Partnership is important because we can say that cohesion policy, because has to deal with the project, with problems and with activities and with real needs of our territory, cannot be decided with a top-down approach, but it is important and it is compulsory to have a discussion with also stakeholders, economic and social partners. This is a very novelty in the last programming period. Okay, these are the main principles of the cohesion policy. We said that we spoke about objectives, and as you remember, in 1988, with the reform that we had, we start speaking about some definition. And in that reform, we start speaking about regional objectives that has to be defined at regional level. I speak about regions because cohesion policy usually refers to regional dimension, but it can work also at national level. And so we have regional objectives that are customized for each area, but we have also objectives with horizontal character. For example, fight against long-term unemployment. Okay, promotion of vocational integration of young people or promotion of workers' adaptation to industrial change. So this has to be defined by each programming period. So just to summarize, we can say that cohesion policy has been promoted and supported by the European Union since the 1980s through the structural funds, which finance programs with shared management between the member states and Commission. And this is important to underline, as I already said, that it is important to have national co-financing. So without national co-finance, and member states cannot receive European support for the cohesion policy. In fact, here I represented a sort of main elements of the policy. So we have the goal, and the goals are economic, social, and territorial cohesion. Then, as you said, we have 3 columns. The first one, we have strategies, funds, and programs that are the pillars on which cohesion policies and structural funds are based. And then we have 2 columns. The first one that works at the European level, and the second one that works at national level. For example, strategies. For the strategies at European level, we have partnership agreement, and this partnership agreement is defined. So it is a sort of negotiation between the member states and the European Commission. And then we have programming documents at national level. Again, for the funds, we have European funds that needs national co-financing, but also at national level, we have national funds, for example, rotation funds. And programs, we have national programs, we have regional programs, but also European territorial cooperation. While at national level, we have customized program per country. I want to highlight one aspect. Here, in this programming period, we start speaking about national programs or regional programs. We lost one O. In fact, in the previous programming period, we were speaking about national operative programs. But stating from this programming period, they decided to keep out O, so of operative, because these programs has to reflect a strategy. And then we have an action plan in order to make them operative. So this is the reason why they decided to keep out the O from the naming of national and regional programs. So I go further because I don't want to waste your time. And we say that the second argument that we have to focus on is the new programming period. The new programming period is important because we have to identify what is happening also with funds, because we need to work on funds. So the European structural funds that support cohesion policy are ERDF, ESF Plus. This is novelty, so because comparing to the previous programming period, in this fund are concentrated 4 of the previous program funds of the programming period. We have another novelty that is the Just Transition Fund. Then we have Cohesion Fund and also European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund. Then, regarding the funds, as I said, also all national countries and member states define their funds that support at national level the European structural funds. For example, for Italy, we have Fondo Sviluppo e Coesione and also Fondo di Rotazione. So what we know, we know what ERDF, ESF Plus will fund, but just to give a quick information for those colleagues that probably they don't know. So European Regional Development Fund is the main financial instrument for fostering the economic and employment growth of European region. We can say that ERDF is strictly connected with physical objectives, so with investment, with the hardware part. In fact, ERDF has 2 main objectives. The first one is investment for growth and employment, and the second one is European territorial cooperation. Then we have European Social Fund Plus. Plus is because it concentrated in one fund the former 4 funds, and it is concentrated on the software part, on human, on people. And in fact, it is the main instrument for investing in people and for implementing the European pillar on social rights, sustain employment and create a social inclusive society. Then we have Cohesion Fund. Cohesion Fund is not for all countries, but only for those member states with a gross national income per capita less than 90% of the EU average. And it provides financial support for the Trans-European network. Just Transition Fund, as I said, is a novelty, is the fund only for this programming period, and it works only for very specific area in each country, that each member states that decided to use this fund. For example, in Italy, we have only 2 areas. That is in Italy, that is in the South Italy, Taranto for Puglia region, and Iglesias for Cagliari for Sardinia. So just to summarize, we can say that the objective of investment for employment and growth have been funded with 4 funds: ERDF, ESF Plus, Cohesion Funds, and Just Transition Fund, while the Interreg objective has been funded only with ERDF. Although probably in the previous meeting you heard about some intervention related to social innovation. So because as we are going to see, there is no so strict and so severe separation between the objectives, because what is important is to create synergies and also to have some cross-fertilization. So another important thing is that those countries, those member states that adopted and have a national plan for recovery and resilience, it's important that the funds has to be planned. So the structural funds has to be planned not only at European level, not only with national resources, but they have to be planned also in coherence with the contents of the national plan for recovery and resilience. But we are saying that cohesion policy is the main policy of investment of the European Union, which is the dimension in budget. We have 373 billion in current price. So as you can see, as you can imagine, this is a very huge amount of money. But money has to be regulated. Money, and so in this case, cohesion policy, need a legal framework. As if you remember, I said many times simplification. I said many times in order to simplify activities. And this is the reason why for this, with this programming period, European Union defined a regulation that is 1060 of 2021 that is a common regulation. So laid down common provision on 8 European funds related to cohesion policy. So, and this is work exactly to simplify the activity. So when you know one regulation, probably you could be able and you could work with the 8 several funds. But of course, cannot be deal only with common provisions. So each fund has also its own regulation. For example, 1058 is the regulation for ERDF, or 1057 is the regulation of the European social funds. And it's important because they are the legal framework working for the next 7 years. Another important document when we are speaking about legal framework, but also strategic framework, is the partnership agreement. Partnership agreement could be defined like a sort of guidance document, and it is negotiated, is discussed also at the national, regional level with the European Commission. So in fact, each member state, basing on the regulation, basing on the national priorities, basing on strategic objectives defined at European level, they have to write and they have to put down their partnership agreement. This partnership agreement then has to be discussed and approved, and only after the approval from the European Commission of the partnership agreement, the member states can start paying money and using money of the cohesion funds. It is so much important that the common regulation, so 1060, defined on article number 10 what partnership agreement is. So it's the document prepared by each member state and approved by the Commission, which set out the strategic orientation for programming and arrangement for the effective and efficient use of the several funds from the period of January 2021 to December 2027. And the partnership agreement defined also the structure also of the operative programs. Why? So this could be considered like a sort of constraints, but it is again another simplification. So according to the common regulation, it says CR is common regulation, so is 1060 regulation, is defined the chapter of the partnership agreement, and also the same common regulation defined the chapters and the paragraphs of the operative programs that has to be included in the partnership agreement. Why this constraint? Why this common structure? Is because, again, for simplification. So if you read one document, for example, prepared by Italian member states, it has to be the same, like to has the same structure. So to simplify the reading, also, for example, for Spain or for, I don't know, France. So in this case, it's important. These constraints and this structure are just for simplification. I said before, policy objectives. We are going to see the comparison between 2014, 2020, and 2021, 2027 differences, one of the differences are related to policy objectives. In fact, if you are aware about the previous programming, probably you heard about thematic objectives, and there were 11 thematic objectives. Now the new nouns, so the new structure of the objectives of the structural funds are based on policy objective. You remember I said that they decided to keep out O operative, because these documents has to deal with strategy, has to deal with policy. So we are working just with 5 policy objectives: smarter Europe, innovative and smart economic transformation, greener, low carbon Europe. This is very important in this programming period. In fact, you are aware about the Green Deal. We have policy objective number 3, a more connected Europe, that is dealing with the mobility, but also ICT connectivity. Policy objective number 4, a more social Europe, the European pillar on social rights, and the policy objective number 5, a Europe closer to citizens. This is novelty, this is new, because it deals with sustainable development of urban, rural, and coastal areas and local initiatives. Okay, why I mentioned again these policy objectives? Because in the partnership agreement, there are some paragraphs. In these paragraphs, there is a strategy of each policy objective. So the member states in the national programming, also in the national programming documents, they have to define the strategy behind each policy objective. Another important thing, complementarity between cohesion funds and other instruments. When we're speaking complementarity here, we are speaking about not only policy, not only strategy, but also about funds. Then we have EU amount for different funds per policy objective and category of region. When we are speaking about category of region, we are speaking about advanced region, in transition, and less developed regions. And then resources of the different programs in EU, resources and co-financing. Again, co-financing, because in the partnership agreement, each member state has to report not only the budget and the funds from European balance, but also from their national contribution. And then, of course, there is the allocation resources for the technical assistance. Okay, I spoke about some novelties, but what's news for this new programming period? The first novelty I mentioned already. We are speaking only some priorities and 5 policy objectives. So they are focused on key objectives that we mentioned, and there are thematic concentration. Climate targets, I mentioned already. We are speaking about the Green Deal, we are speaking about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So climate, environment is one of the pillars in all projects. And also in all projects, in all the application forms, also in those projects that are not properly dealing with climate, we have any way to introduce possible connection and support to this objective. Then we have greater empowerment of local, urban, and territorial authorities in the management of funds. In fact, all these organizations, all these institutions is much more important in order to be operations that are effective. If you remember, one of the principles was the partnership. So this project has to be built with the top-down but also bottom-up approach. Then the main keyword of this programming period, simplification. In fact, we said we have one single of rules for 8 funds. Of course, this means also with lighter and more frequent reporting. Not 3 per year, but now 5 per year. But a report that is not much more concentrated on financial aspects than on technical, on contents. This is something different between structural funds and direct management funds, because with direct funds, usually you are much more focused on the quality, on the content, while the rules, financial rules, are much more lighter. Instead, up to this programming period, with the indirect and with the structural funds, the financial part, regulation, administrative part was so very heavy. So we have some other elements is creating condition for success, flexible programming. So it is possible, for example, as we are going to say, to move funds from one fund to another or to one program to another, while it was forbidden in the previous programming period. And another important thing that is related to the first news that I told you about the Eurobarometer, there is reinforced visibility and communication provision, because the European Commission wants that all citizens knows about the European support for the development. So the support that the European Commission provides to each citizens for the development of their territory. So I'm going to go very, very fast in this section. So priorities. We were speaking 11 thematic objectives in the previous programming period. Now we are speaking about policy objective. We have one specific objective for increasing the capacity of public authorities and stakeholders, while in this programming period it is a horizontal action, so it is a cross-cutting. All programs, so all priorities needs to be focused on capacity building and cooperation. This is important. These are rules. So condition for success. What is this called condition for success? In the previous programming period, we were talking about ex-ante conditionality. So it was a sort of mandatory fulfillment that each partner, each member states has to guarantee. And it will be possible also to suspend or interrupt intermediate payment if these conditionalities are not respected. In this programming period, we are speaking about enabling condition. It is few enabling condition, limited, concise, exhaustive. For example, what I mean, enabling condition could be horizontal and also vertical. Horizontal, something that could apply to all funds, to all programs, and this is, for example, the check of monitoring and the rules for public procurement. So all member states has to assure a proper control, a proper monitoring for procurements, for the right processing of procurements. While one vertical, it could be, for example, the adoption of policies for reducing gender inequality. So it is something that is wider, it is not strict, it is not very detailed from a legal point of view, but it is wider. So for example, if there are some of you dealing also with transport teams and some transport arguments, if one municipality or if one region, macro region, has not applied a plan for the mobility, for the sustainable mobility, well, they cannot receive funds. Environment and climate. Then I want to concentrate on the third one. So in the previous programming period, we have minimum contribution at fund level to climate target. It was only some specific objectives dealing with climate, while in this programming period, we have to apply at least 3% of the budget. Another thing that probably all of you heard about is do not significant harm principle. So before, in the previous programming period, it was a responsibility of managing authority to undertake action to avoid or reduce environmental risk, while with this programming period, all beneficiaries has to assure not only ex ante, but also in writing their proposal, in implementing their proposal, that they have to respect the principle of do not significant harm against the environment. Midterm review. Midterm review, it is a critical point in this case, because probably all of you heard about this flexibility amount, that these key points of 2026, 2027. Well, this is the point in which there is a midterm review again on how you use funds, but there is also the possibility to move these funds in order to increase as much as possible your performance. Performance framework, as you can see, this is one of the goals that they want to reach with this programming period. In fact, they defined indicators that has to used not only in programming, but also for monitoring, reporting, and also for the evaluation. And another important thing is the third one, common results indicators introduced. Where you can find this common results indicator, of course, in the common regulation that is 1060. And all programs could be measured and could be analyzed also based on these common indicators. Partnership agreement, okay, we already mentioned the importance of this document. This is something interesting that we already mentioned anyway. In 2014-2020, it was not possible at all to transfer funds from one fund to another. So it was the rule of non-transferability of the resources between categories and regions, while in this programming period, it's possible to transfer these funds. For example, it's possible to transfer among different ERDF, ESF plus, or it is possible to move from ERDF to Just Transition Fund. And the last one is important. It's possible also to move a sort of amount of money also between programs, and we are going to see also the synergies between the direct and indirect funds. Another important thing is monitoring. We said it is not only that could be a few times per day, per year, sorry, 3 times per year. Now we are going to do 5 times per year. Performance and monitoring are strictly connected, and so in this case is something that is important. In fact, in all your project, in all the program, you have to write on how you have in mind to monitor and to guarantee the right monitoring and evaluation of your operation. Communication and visibility, again, it's important that to have a single brand. It's important to be the recognition of projects funded by the European funds, and for this reason there are much more rules and much more guidelines and indication regarding this specific topic. Then financial support from the funds. This is something interesting. In the previous programming period, we were working mainly with reimbursement based on real cost. And as you know, or better, you that manage, those of us that worked with real cost knows that sometimes it is a nightmare, because there are many rules, there are many possibilities to make some mistakes and to see cut budget, while because in this programming period they want to be much more concentrated on focus, on content and on impacts, they are pushing on to the use of a simplified cost option. Again, management and control, it is the same concept. Before you have to check, or better, the certifying authority or the designated authority has to certify all the expenditures, while in this programming period there are some important elements. For example, risk-based sample management verification. So they want to introduce the concept of risk-based or proportionate arrangement according to the risk detected. And another important element for the beneficiary is the overall single audit principle, in order to avoid duplication of audit. Because now, for example, in the project funded by 2014-2020, probably you heard about beneficiary that has been received the audit of first level controller, the audit of the managing authority, the audit of the second level control, audit at European level. So several times, and it means loss of time and also of budget, the same expenditures have been audited by several authorities. Now, within this programming period, they want to change this issue. Evaluation again is important. As you can see, that there's no the obligation of conduct an ex-ante evaluation by the member states, but each member state is obliged to finalize some evaluation in some specific year. So, for example, to June 2029 has to evaluate the impact. Now, in this case, we are not speaking only the funds absorption, but for the first time we are speaking seriously also about the impact. And here another keyword of the meeting of today, synergies. Synergies because there are some provision and simplified guidelines in order to create synergy at the funds and financial level between direct and indirect funds. Mainly, for example, one example that we're going to see better is the Seal of Excellence of Horizon Europe that could anyway be funded, a project that receive a Seal of Excellence, but for example, there's no more budget on European Horizon Europe call, could be funded also with ERDF funds under some conditions. Okay, so up to now we made a sort of general picture of which is the program of this period. Now we make a specific focus on health and social opportunities. As we say that the policy objective 4 is the one dedicated to a more social Europe. And a more social Europe could be obtained according to programming to the policy by following 6 or better 5 objectives, 5 specific objectives that are employment, education, training and lifelong learning, socioeconomic inclusion of marginalized group and of third country nationals, healthcare and long-term care, culture and sustainable tourism contributing to the economic and social development. So, and another important thing that you can see from these slides, there are ESF plus soft measures and also ERDF. As we said before, ERDF is the hardware, ESF are the software in a way. So, and they could be combined and they have to work together. Here there is many things. I took these images, so it is just really a copy paste from the regulation, specific regulation of the ESF plus. Why? Here are listed all the specific objectives that are funded by the ESF plus. Just reading some of them just to have an idea and the sound of which are the content. So specific objective, for example, could be improving access to the employment and activation measures for all job seekers, in particular young people, especially through the implementation of the Young Guarantee. Or promoting equal access to and completion of quality and inclusive education and training, in particular for disadvantaged groups. Or promoting lifelong learning, in particular flexible upskilling and reskilling opportunity for all, taking into account entrepreneurial and digital skills. Or again, promoting socioeconomic integration of the third country nationals, including migrants. Enhancing equal and timely access to quality, sustainable and affordable services, including services that promote the access to housing and person-centered care, including healthcare. So as you can see just by reading these few words, the objectives are very wide. So we are moving from training, we are moving to support job seekers, and we are focusing also to migrants, to Roma, or also to healthcare and housing. So if we are saying we can work only for social inclusion and healthcare, so we can work only on priority on policy objectives 4, no, the answer is no, because ESF Plus can contribute also to other policy objectives, like for example, a smarter Europe, or a greener, low carbon and smarter Europe. You remember it is a policy objective number 1, while greener, low carbon Europe is policy objective number 2. How it can contribute? Maybe, for example, providing skills for smart specialization or skills for reskilling, upskilling for workers. Just now to have a difference, because we say that ESF Plus is the software part, ERDF is the hardware part. For example, Article number 3 of the specific regulation of ERDF give us an idea of specific objectives that are funded with ERDF fund for each specific policy objective. Then we have that for the policy objective number 1 is developing and enhancing research and innovation capacities and the uptake of advanced technology. Or again, reaping the benefit of digitization for citizens, companies, research organizations, and public authorities. Developing skills for smart specialization, industrial transition, and entrepreneurship. So, start thinking. These are the same words. It seems more or less same objectives. It's normal because the policy objectives are the same. Then we have to find the right way on which we have to develop both investment for ERDF and investment for ESF+. What it doesn't mean that, for example, with the priority number 1, we could set up, we can build investment research, for example, incubators, while with ESF+, we can develop the we can develop capacities and skills for new researchers or workers. Again, I want to point your attention on priority number 4. For example, the specific objectives that could be tackled with ERDF under policy objective number 4, that you remember is much more social Europe, is enhancing the effectiveness and inclusiveness of labor market and access to quality employment through developing social infrastructure and promoting social economy. Or also promoting the socioeconomic inclusion of marginalized communities, low-income households and disadvantaged groups, including people with special needs, through integrated actions, including housing and social services. So again, infrastructure. Here we can have houses. With ESF+, we could have social housing. But I want to give some examples because otherwise these are just pure words. I found some examples. For example, DevUp-TIP. This has been a project funded in Brussels, and it has been funded with the ERDF. So with these funds, we are speaking about more or less 300,000 EU contribution. A company had the opportunity to explore new economic opportunities, and the new economic opportunities allowed enterprises to identify and develop new activities to employ people with disabilities. So starting from ERDF, so probably with an intervention focused on innovation, so policy objective number 1, we can say in this programming period, we had a social impact because as a result, more than 1,390 workers with disability found employment. Another example, totally different. In Croatia, in this case, we have a project that is named eSchools, and in this case has been funded with 2 funds, so 34 million so from ERDF and ESF. You cannot see the plus because it refers to the previous programming period, but the goal of this project was to test the pilot introduction of ICT equipment and digital education in Croatia. Well, what has been obtained? That thanks to the lesson learned in the pilot, a new framework is being developed that will extend to a model to around 700 primary and secondary schools. So in this case, we can see how work together software and hardware, and this imply also a policy intervention because they decided, basing on this pilot activity, on how to modify their national policy and funds allocation. Another example is in Spain. So in this case, it is ERDF funds that assisted the social housing agency in Madrid and with this support that was more or less 31 million, this allowed the purchase more than 600 social housing units on the second-hand property market. And in this case, the program has helped numerous disadvantaged families to improve their housing situation and to better integrate into the community. And the last example that I found and I want to share with you, heard in Estonia. In this case, the support was with ERDF fund. So where they developed, they created a new integrated health center in Kadrina. And in this case, we have interventions, infrastructural interventions, so hard part, so ERDF, and the project in this case provides high quality primary healthcare services, physiotherapy, home nursing, and these reduce the time patients spend reaching different services and facilitation, and they facilitate also the consultation between specialists. As you can see, the objective was done to obtain social inclusion, better integration, better condition for patients, as be achieved also with RDF investment in this case. These are just few examples, but the European Commission wants that we capitalize on the lesson learned, that we start moving probably on some project that could be considered like best practices, so or that we can learn about also about cross-fertilization, or we could be in contact with other beneficiaries that had problems or had needs similar to ours, and we can work together, we can take advantages from their history and from their experience. And for this reason, it has been created a platform that is called Cohesion, and here there is a database that actually contains more than 1 million projects and approximately 500,000 beneficiaries. And here you can find all projects funded at national level with the cohesion policy. If you want to concentrate on European territorial cooperation, that again is funded under ERDF, there are another platform that is keep.eu. And then last but not least, synergies. As we said before, also in the specific regulation and the legal framework, there is the possibility to have synergies between Horizon Europe and cohesion policy. According to the programs and according to the regulation, this cohesion, this synergy is mainly dedicated to innovation. So Horizon Europe is fully dedicated on innovation, and on the other side we have policy objective number 1, that is for a more smarter Europe. In this way, there are also regulation, both common provision regulation, that is 1060 of 2021, and also Horizon regulation that underline the importance to optimize the synergies between the funds and that are managed from direct and indirect point of view. How it will be done? First of all, the preconditions, so strategies has to be aligned. And anyway, this has been done. So we have alignment of legal provision, and also in this case, the legal provision of different programs has been aligned, and there are also joint support initiatives in order to sustain and in order to promote the creation of these synergies. Which are the synergies that could be foreseen? Seal of excellence. As I said before, for example, if one company participates to Horizon Europe call, they received a good evaluation, but there's no enough budget. Well, if they receive this seal of excellence, it will be possible if there are some conditions, like, for example, they are coherent with the program of ERDF of those region or those nation. It's possible that ERDF funds provide funds to this project without a new qualitative evaluation. So in this case, if you receive seal of excellence, you can go to the intermediate organization, for example, in my case, Apulia region, and I could ask for be directly funded without a new qualitative evaluation of the competent body. This means a reduction of time spent, and so the possibility to increase the competitiveness. Of course, there are some key elements to evaluate. For example, the funding rate, if the selection procedure more or less has been the same, if it has been evaluated the state aid rule, because state aid is a key point for the cohesion policy. Another aspect, very, very sensitive and very important, is cumulative funding. So it is possible, we are very well known about avoid double funding. Avoid double funding. In the past period, we had some stamps on invoices, on payments documents. In this case, we say that it's possible to have cumulative funding, that it doesn't mean to pay with two different funds the same expenditures, but it means that one project could be funded, could be received support from different expenditures again, but by different funds that are direct and indirect. Another thing is European partnership. So European partnership, as you know, is funded within Horizon Europe, and in this case, ERDF funds could be used like a member state contribution in Horizon Europe partnership. This could be also an incentive for participating to these programs. Of course, there are some elements that has to be evaluated case by case, but in general, this is an important aspect in order to foster participation of member states to European partnership. And then this is very tricky but interesting. It's possible to transfer funds from ERDF, for example, to Horizon Europe. Why? Imagine that, for example, a member state or region wants to push, wants to foster, wants to incentivize the participation of small and medium enterprises to Horizon Europe programs in order to reach the objective of Lisbon Treaty of to have economy based on knowledge. In this case, we know that the rate of evaluation, the success rate of small and medium enterprises participating in Horizon Europe is not so high. So in this case, a member state could decide to transfer some budget of ERDF to Horizon Europe to allow the funding of more small and medium enterprises, for those specific arguments, those specific topics. And in this way, it will be possible to have much more interaction and innovation at European level. So these are the main information I want to share with you. And if you have some question, I'm at your, or doubts or something, I'm at your disposal.
Thank you very much, Angela, for the detailed, comprehensive and interesting presentation. Of course, it is a very wide topic to be presented. So thank you. You managed to just, of course, focus on the main aspects. First, I would leave maybe colleagues if they have any questions. Otherwise, I have a couple of questions. Okay. Please, colleagues, don't be shy. You can take the floor if you wish. Okay. The presentation will be available shortly after on the page, on the dedicated page of our website. Okay, we will just again publish the link. Okay, I can see that maybe it's not working. Okay, so Angela, I would like to ask, could you please specify if projects supporting health and let's say social inclusion could be funded under the policy objective 4, a more social Europe?
Okay, yes, but not only. In the sense that health and social inclusion could be analyzed and could be seen from different perspectives. For example, if we are speaking about e-health or telemedicine, okay, it is a topic related to more social Europe, so it could be funded under priority number 4. But it could be related also to smarter Europe. So, for example, it will be possible to fund a research or a university, a research center, a company that wants to develop a specific health application. So we need to start thinking in a wider and synergetic and holistic approach. So One Health approach is something that we have to reflect also in our programming activities. So not only one, also, for example, if we are speaking about greening, if we are speaking about deal climate change, tourism, and so on, we could start thinking also about silver economy, silver tourism. So it's important to have a wider approach, and it will be possible to be funded into several policy objectives. Of course, the fourth one is the most dedicated to this topic, but it is not the last one.
Okay, thank you very much, Angela. It is indeed very interesting then. As I was saying before in the beginning, we are working together with colleagues within the Work Package 5. So, of course, our main objective within the joint action is to increase the capacity building of national focal points and support the implementing of the EU4Health program, but not only, because we would be then also ready to provide further information and guidance to the national stakeholders. And then I would like also to ask is if apart from what you have been presented with regard to the synergies among Horizon and ERDF, are there any other opportunities to create synergies when it comes to research, for example?
Okay. Yes, I want to answer to this question with an example to be much more clear. It is not dealing with health, but I want to explain the approach. Okay, during the presentation and also the European Commission speak about synergies, as we said, the possibility to have transfer of funds or to use funds together. But synergy could mean also to have a wider perspective again in planning, in defined project activities. So for example, we started in some years ago with the Erasmus Plus Knowledge Alliance. And with that program, we started defining an industrial doctorate for Industria 4.0 activity. So thanks to those programs and those projects whose name was GENAS, we developed an international doctorate path that has been recognized by several universities. Then, all these countries, participating countries, they cannot implement, they cannot test because Erasmus in that case didn't pay for a fellowship. So each partner developed some other projects with regional funds in order to have the development of fellowship, in order to start activating, in order to activate this activity more. Because we were speaking about Industry 4.0 with another project of European territorial cooperation, we had the opportunity to create a virtual incubator in order to promote this activity and to promote the occupation of young researchers. So this is another example on which direct and indirect funds could work. And I think if I can say that the national focal points are very important in order to create this kind of synergies, because they know exactly what could be done thanks to the program that they are related to, and could help working the right network and the right opportunities.
Thank you very much, Angela, for the clarification. And let's say it is also a positive answer to be heard. Of course, we hope that towards the end of the project, we will be increasing and reinforcing not only the capacity building, but the network as well. This is something definitely that is part of our objectives. And yeah, I also take the opportunity to thank colleagues for also being very much active with our activities. I don't know if there is any other comment or question. If not, I also indicated our email of the coordination team, the Italian team. You can, of course, provide us with written questions as well. Do not hesitate, of course, to check our social media and website for the next updates. The next week, on the 6th of June, we are organizing the next training online with regard to presentation of the technical support instrument. We are working, of course, hard before the summer break, so we want to make sure that we are covering all the most important topics. Well, if there are no other comments, I think we are just 15 minutes ahead agenda. We can close the session. Thank you again, Angela, for your presentation, and thank you, colleagues, for participating always. And do not forget to fill in the evaluation survey. So thank you again, and see you next